Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of our Back to School series about applying for internships. So with me today I have Priyanka, who is currently an intern at Google, and I will leave it to Priyanka to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the application process for her internship and what her internship looks like.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sophie. So hi everyone, my name is Priyanka. I have just finished second year in engineering at Pembroke College. And I am currently an intern at Google on their STEP program, which is a program aimed for people in their first year on a 3-year course or second year on a 4-year course. It's in software engineering, which is what I'm hoping to work in the future, even though I do engineering. So yeah, I applied for this program in about November of second year. I'd previously interned in first year over the summer in a small firm in London, but I have no kind of formal computer science experience. So I never did computer science GCSE or A-level. Those of you who do engineering will know that the kind of coding courses and the programming courses in first year aren't the best. So yeah, I'm basically mostly self-taught, and I'm not that good. I think I should probably put that out there now. You don't have to be that experienced to be successful with internship applications. So when I applied for the Google STEP program, I received a massive pack, and it was full of all these things that were like, oh, brush up on your computer science fundamentals, make sure you know all of these fancy terms. And I'd never heard of any of them before. So I was really stressed. And so I kind of tried to teach myself them, but it didn't go very well. And eventually I just kind of abandoned that and thought, I'm going to go over what I do know, what I've learned previously, and hope that that's enough. And so when it came to my interview, they actually didn't ask me any sort of theory or any kind of questions that were like, oh, can you name 50 billion data structures or algorithms? There was no kind of theory. It was all, how do you think about the problem that we're presenting you now? So I'd say that when it comes to applying to software engineering internships, and particularly places like Google, don't think that you're not good enough just because you haven't got that much experience, because the programs are designed to give you that experience. The best thing to do to practice is to kind of have a look at things like Code Jam, and there are national and international coding competitions that put all of their rounds online. And those can be really useful resources, because rather than teaching you kind of computer science theory, they teach you how to think in the moment for the kind of questions that you will get asked at an interview at a place like Google. Yeah, what was the next part of the question?
Cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you about what resources have been really helpful. So it's great that you've touched on that already. But I was going to ask you why you chose kind of software engineering as a whole, and also why Google, why among other firms you might have applied to.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, why software engineering? I really like it. I don't know what else I could say. It's software engineering and programming in general is very hit or miss. You either love it or you hate it, as I've discovered over the past couple of years. Yeah, there's a good scope for progression, I think, within the industry. If you're looking to go further, you can go deeper and deeper into kind of the more computer sciencey side, the more theoretical side if you wanted to go into research, or you could kind of slowly move towards more kind of project management, product management, that kind of route. So I quite like how the industry is structured, because you're not kind of boxed in. And that kind of relates to why I wanted to work for Google, or why I applied in the first place, because I think huge companies like that offer so much scope for progression and movement. So, for example, I'm currently interning at the Zurich office, but virtually, so from home. But I could theoretically be interning for basically any office across Europe, and in the future, any office across the world I could be working for. So it gives you such great opportunities, I think, to branch out. And in terms of why Google over other big firms, I'm obviously very biased, but I think Google has a really good ethos and a really good kind of view towards a work-life balance. I've heard horror stories about other big companies where you work really late hours, or you work really long, kind of like you might be working on your weekends, but Google is very much kind of, you work about 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday, you switch off from work on the weekends. I'm personally quite flexible. My manager's quite flexible in terms of which hours I work, which is really good. They're perfectly happy for you to kind of take a couple of hours off in the afternoon and then make them up at a later date. And they're also really big on checking in on you, which comes across during the application process as well. Like, your recruiter's constantly in touch beyond just kind of the general, don't forget to hand this form in. They actually ask, like, how are you finding this? How are you feeling about that? Now that I'm actually interning here, I have regular checkups to make sure that I'm not overworking, or kind of to make sure that I'm able to switch off from work, which I really like. I think that's a really good way to run a company. So yeah.
Okay, it's really great to hear you talk about the ethos a little, but I was also wondering how you managed to kind of differentiate yourself in the interview process, and what you think that you did that made you ultimately successful.
Yeah, so the thing I'd say you probably need to do is show that you're actually interested in programming and software engineering beyond just kind of what you learn in your degree itself. So I haven't done that much kind of project work, but I did take part in a couple of university society related software engineering projects, and I think it helped that I was self-taught. So I taught myself how to code in sixth form, just over one of the summers, as something to do. And I think it's important to show that you have that interest and that passion outside of just kind of your degree. But I wouldn't say that you need to go above and beyond and like kind of build an entire website or build an app that is entirely your own. I think it's okay to not have kind of huge amounts of experience, as long as you have something that showed your interest. Yeah, and also don't sell yourself short, because you don't have to have already like coded something brilliant in order to get into a place like this. You just have to show that you're willing to try and code something brilliant.
Cool. Are there any other resources you'd recommend to people, starting with coding, who might not have any experience? I think you mentioned a few at the beginning. I was wondering if there were any more you knew of.
Yeah, sure. So if you're completely new and you've never coded at all before, I used a couple of courses on the platform EDX, sorry. So I did a Microsoft course and an MIT course, which are free to do if you don't want to get the qualification at the end. So those were really good starting points. I think Code Academy is quite a good starting point. And then if you are like a little bit more experienced, then for preparation for internship interviews, I'd say CodeJam is a good website. And yeah, that's pretty much the only one I can think of that I used. Kind of the same kind of things that people use to practice for hacker ranks, if you've heard of those. Those are often used for banks and like finance related technology internships. And I think the same kind of questions do get asked, ones that are more about problem solving than theoretical knowledge. So kind of do your research and just find any sort of banks of questions online. That would be really useful.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, kind of talking about the application process. So now you're on the internship. It'll be great to hear a little bit about that day to day. And also on top of that, now doing the internship, what do you wish you knew when you were applying for it?
Yeah, so kind of day to day, the way the STEP program works is you're assigned to a project along with a pod partner. So that's another STEP intern. And you have two hosts who are your managers. And the project is scoped to last over 12 weeks. And I've found that my project is really well scoped. So I don't feel like I'm overworking or underworking. I think I've got the right amount to do for the time that I've got, which is really nice. I kind of work from about 9:30 to about 5:30. It's kind of when I work, unless I take a few hours off in the day, and then I'll just make them up in the evening. So yeah, I think the work-life balance is really good, and the work is really interesting. I feel engaged in my project, and there's lots of opportunities to network. They have a lot of events and like coffee chats and things, even in this virtual setting, which allow you to meet other interns, other Googlers. So yeah, that's really good. The application process was two technical interviews, and then once you pass those, you have a project matching interview where teams who have a project that they would like an intern to work on will look at all the candidates who passed the technical interviews and see which ones they think might suit their project, and then they'll pull you out of a pool to give you an interview. And if they think that you're kind of a right fit for the team, then they'll make you an offer for the internship. So it's you don't really get an offer from Google, you get an offer from a particular team in a particular office, which is quite nice. Oh, and then what was the last bit? Oh, what do I wish I knew now? I wish I hadn't have been so scared that I was going to be the least experienced and the least knowledgeable, because the program is literally designed for people who haven't had that much coding experience. It's designed to not so much teach you, but kind of provide an environment in which you can get really good. So I wish I had not stressed myself out thinking that I was going to be way worse than everybody else. I think it's always important to kind of not worry that everyone else is going to be better than you before you even start. I think give these processes and give these internships a chance, and give yourself a chance to prove yourself before you write yourself off.
Okay, fab. I think that's a really great note to end on, unless you have any last pieces of advice for anyone thinking of applying to these internships.
I think I'd just end by saying that there is still quite a kind of a stigma. I think that, like, oh, women in computing especially, like, there aren't that many of us, and so is it really like a nice environment to work in? And to that I'd say that, like, obviously it varies from place to place, and some places will feel a little bit more sexist than others, but Google is absolutely not one of those places. I think everyone is treated completely equally. I've not once in the past 6 weeks felt like my gender has had anything to do with my ability or the way I'm treated. So I'd say that don't let that scare you or put you off, and don't let, like, the number of women who already are software engineers put you off, because of course it is quite low, but the only way we change that is by going into the industry ourselves. So yeah.
Okay, cool. I think it's really great that you kind of touched on that. I know a lot of people are going to feel intimidated and going into such a male-heavy environment. So I think it's really good to hear that. And yeah, thank you so much for talking to us. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our internship series. And today I have Caroline with me, who is an intern at Morgan Stanley this summer and also was successful in her applications at many other banks. So I'm going to let Caroline introduce herself now.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Caroline. I've just finished my second year at the University of Leeds studying natural sciences. I started my application process 2 years ago for the Springs. I went in very underprepared. I was literally taken to a lecturer at the University of Leeds by a couple of my flatmates who were also interested in the industry. It was sort of a massive crash course of, this is what you need to do if you want to go into banking. This also was in mid-November, so it's halfway through the spring application cycle. So I sort of pedaled to the metal for the last month of applications, just submitted as many applications as I could to all of the banks, got rejected from absolutely everywhere except Goldman, which was a very unexpected, random, and I think is genuinely because Goldman is one of the only places that doesn't do those situational judgment tests. So I got through the second round of interviews, and then got a place on their sales and trading spring internship, which was virtual, in May 2020. Did that in their EM, so emerging markets equity sales division, loved it, and then went into the summer, COVID summer of 2020, being like, I know this is the industry that I want to go into, really, really excited to go into it. And then I put in the application to sort of the big five, so JP, Morgan Stanley, Goldman, BAML, and Citi. I put those applications in, and then I think I did like 5 or 6 more, but I only put in 11 or 12 applications total. Went back to uni as in sort of early September, caught COVID, which wasn't the best, and this is exactly when all of the internships were starting to get back to you about first round interviews, assessment tests that you have to do before you get your phone interviews. So I had to do a couple of them with crippling COVID, which was not the most pleasant, but got through that, got through to phone interviews for Morgan Stanley, which is where I am now, JP and Citi. Did all of those, and then I fast forward, got through to Morgan Stanley final assessment centre, got an offer from there. So I did my assessment centre on the Wednesday, I got my offer on the Thursday, and on the Wednesday, because I'd done my spring at Goldman, I then received my assessment centre for Goldman that same day. So I just found out, I'd literally come off the assessment centre to realise I had another one due in next week. Did my Goldman assessment centre knowing I had my Morgan Stanley offer, and so I kindly asked them if they could sort of respect my deadline so I could make an informed decision. They did not, so I took Morgan Stanley. So grateful that I did, and I definitely got to experience both banks. But yeah, I ended up getting offers from Goldman, JP, and Morgan Stanley, and so I ended up at Morgan Stanley and couldn't be happier.
Okay, cool. That was a really great summary of kind of everything you've, like, all your experience so far. But also, I was wondering kind of why sales and trading over other banking divisions or even other sectors as a whole.
Yeah, so first of all, sales and trading, I mean, firstly, it was where I got my spring internship with, so it was the only division that I'd had proper exposure to. I had considered research, given my degree type is very much research based. And I will get on to why I didn't choose that. I guess the obvious one is why not investment banking? Honestly, I think the work seems actually quite boring. I know that's a sort of controversial opinion, but I prefer to be in a much more fast-paced, markets-focused role than I would working on these big projects, which is very much what investment banking is. It's project-based. It's pedal to the metal when there is work, and the hours are quite extreme. Sales and trading hours are by no means easy, but they're sort of capped at maybe 14, 15 hours a day, whereas investment banking can be a tiny bit longer. Research as well, when I was applying, the only reason I didn't fully consider it was because I didn't think it was entirely client facing, which I thought my softer skills were more suited to a client facing role. And I know from university that it would be involved in doing massive deep dives into areas and becoming the true expert of that sector. And I think for me, I prefer to be a bit more jack of all trades and in touch with the markets than just have one very sort of sector or sector specific view that you are the complete expert in. That's just my personal preference. But in terms of other areas, so obviously I had initially considered pharmaceuticals because of my degree type. I did interview with AstraZeneca and then realized that maybe it wasn't for me. I considered going into the sort of business side of pharma, but then I realized I sort of morally disagreed with how big pharma was run. Again, this is just personal preference, and I know I am ridiculed that morals go into investment banking, but it sort of ended up suiting me. And then other divisions, other sort of areas I thought of working in were accountancy, because both my parents were accountants, but I thought sort of working with the markets was a little bit more interesting and a little bit less boring. And then consulting was the only other one that I considered, and I did end up getting an offer from McKinsey as well, which I had a really hard time turning down. But again, I think I realized, given my spring, that I really enjoyed it. But I think consulting is really, really interesting, and definitely it is project based, but it's a little bit faster than, say, investment banking. But I preferred to work in sort of a much more fast paced industry that is sort of more focused on the markets. But I definitely considered lots of other sectors and industries.
Okay, cool. That would be really helpful for people kind of deciding what industry to go into, because I know that there's so much out there kind of when you're starting out at uni. And then obviously with all these internships, you're kind of applying among thousands or tens of thousands of other candidates. And what do you think that you did to kind of differentiate yourself and ultimately make you successful?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is even if you've done something small or something that you think would be fairly insignificant. So for example, as soon as I turned 18, I started working in a pub. You'd think that would be of no relevance to a bank, but why would anyone care about that? But there have been multiple desks that have expressed interest because they see that you've done actually normal jobs, and that makes you a bit more interesting. So I think, first of all, know experience you have is irrelevant, which I definitely found surprising. And secondly, especially for the people who are coming from a non sort of economics financial background, definitely don't perceive your degree as a weakness or something that's going to act as a disadvantage. I think the way to play it is just make your degree your thing that sets you apart. So if, for example, like me, you've got a scientific degree, oh, well, that's interesting. Maybe you're interested in pharma, maybe you're interested in healthcare, biotech. How can you use that to make it interesting and make that your talking point that sets you apart? Obviously, you do need to have sort of the same ground level knowledge as everyone else, but I think if you can explain why your differences play to an advantage and are sort of useful to the company and will make you a sort of asset to the team that you're working in, then I would not worry about it. And that's, I think, the main thing. But it's definitely, and above all, just have confidence in yourself. It sounds the most cliche thing to say, but if you believe in yourself, you can probably do it. And sometimes it is just unfortunate, wrong time, wrong place. But I always do the stupid thing of telling myself, you are going to get this job, you are going to get this job, every night before I interviewed. 9 times out of 10 it worked. So I think having that final bit of belief and sort of conviction in yourself really does sort of push you over the line, because if in doubt, say everything with confidence.
Fab. So you mentioned you come from a scientific background. So are there any resources that were kind of helpful during the application process and kind of getting you up to speed in finance and things like that?
Yeah, so I sort of took a bit of a weird route, but initially, to get you started, just try and read like the Financial Times. You don't need to read much, but I think a lot of it is the language that's used, and you'll realise that when you start working, that half of it, they may as well be speaking Spanish to you, like it is just another language. So read what interests you in the Financial Times. You do not need to read it cover to cover or anything that doesn't interest you, but just to sort of have a broad idea of what's going on in the world. For equities stuff, and another interesting website is actually the Motley Fool, which I found quite useful as well, just for investment ideas. I know a lot of people talk about Wall Street Oasis. That can be quite useful, and there are definitely sort of books and courses that you can buy to help with the interview process. I personally think you can find everything you need for free, but if it makes you feel more comfortable to have written out answers, you can sort of invest in those things. I personally choose not to because they're quite expensive, but it's whatever makes you feel the most comfortable. I'm pretty sure that's it, but generally just having interesting things to talk about, and just honestly, if you Google equities, FX, rates stuff, like you will find stuff that's interesting and find websites that link to you. So yeah, but Financial Times was the core for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think staying up to date on the markets is probably more important than your financial understanding. And I'd also recommend, so when I was applying, I used Bloomberg because they had a free student subscription at that time. I think it was on offer, but that's really great if you want to stay up with the news. Like they've got their news is really, short and sweet and to the point, which is really useful. And also, so having started the internship and being almost, close to the end now, what advice would you give to yourself when applying that you might not have known then?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, and everyone will tell you this when you start, is do not go in with any preconceptions. So you may think you're really suited to a sales role, but you may end up in trading. And I think sort of it's always good to have your areas that you prefer, so be that equities, and especially equities are generally the easier thing to read up on before you start. But I think if you can sort of be very, very open-minded about everything, and even if your preferences don't go your way, you don't end up working for the bank that you want to, everything happens for a reason. You just need to have confidence that sort of everything will fall into the right place for you. And it is quite sort of scary at the time, but that's definitely one piece of advice I'd have. And the second is just keep pushing it. You will get there, you will get through it. And gosh, what else do I wish I knew? before I started. You will never be more tired than you will on the internship, but it is all worth it. And just no matter what, just pick yourself up, keep going. And if it doesn't happen first time, it will happen for you eventually. I think when it comes to the application process, a good thing is to you'll always get asked about a story that you're interested in the news, especially for sales and trading. I'm not sure about for investment banking, but if you have one story that you're comfortable talking about, each interview you do, because you will have lots of them with lots of different banks, if you keep that story and you keep talking to people about it, people will add in things that you didn't know about it. And so every interview you go into, you'll have more information than you did previously. So I think just building on simple things, like there's no need to be super technical. No one's going to expect you to know all of the nitty gritty of finance. So it's just showing that you have a genuine interest, and that can be through sort of political knowledge or sort of stock specific or sector specific or your investments that you're currently making. But whatever you have, just speak about it with passion, and that will definitely help you.
Cool. So I feel like that's quite a nice note to end on. But just before we go, obviously, this is the Women in Business Society, and sales and trading is very male dominated. So if you have any words for someone who might be intimidated about going into such a male dominated industry, and how you've kind of addressed that when being on the trading floor, any advice about that?
Yeah, so as Sophie says, it's definitely very apparent when you hit the trading floor that there are significantly more men than women. And although there is a big push at the moment to get more women into the industry, it can be quite difficult dealing with that initially. And I think the hardest thing is seeing the way that males on the desks that you're working for treat the male interns compared to you. And so although it seems unfair that you have to sort of maybe work that bit harder, there's no reason that you shouldn't succeed. So I think it's just having confidence, trying to treat them so try and approach everyone as equals. So don't treat someone different because they're a woman or because they're a man. You just need to go confident that you're good enough. You need to just try and ignore it, because at the end of the day, if you're good enough, you will get a job. But it can be annoying and it can be perceived as a barrier, but I think you just have to have that confidence that I'm on this internship for a reason. I've got here by my own merit, my own accord. Obviously align yourself with women, senior women in senior women in senior positions. But honestly, I think if you create it as a barrier in your mind, that's a lot more detrimental to you than it is to anyone else, because they won't see that they're treating you maybe implicitly differently. So I think if you just go up and be yourself and be confident and would treat them the same as you treat a woman, then they should 9 times out of 10 give you the same respect back. And sometimes it will seem that you need to produce more work, more high quality work than your male counterparts on the internship, but even so, that is going to make you a better employee at the end of the day. And then when you get in, it will make you more likely to succeed. So even though it is frustrating, it's not something that you should focus on. I think if you do sort of demonize it in your head, it's only going to affect you and not anyone else. So I think you just have to ignore, push, believe in yourself, and everything will be okay. But align yourself with as many women as you can, and they'll definitely guide you through the process. I'm sure all the juniors that join the desk who are women know the process, know the pain, and so they're there to look after you as well. So that would be my piece of advice.
Yeah, I definitely agree about aligning yourself with senior women, because I don't think I realized how much before the internship I kind of value like my female connections and their advice, as obviously it's a different experience. Anyway, so thank you so much for all the advice today. I hope this has been useful for everyone watching, and yeah, thank you again.
No worries. And if anyone needs any or wants to talk to me, they're more than welcome to link up with me on LinkedIn. My name's Caroline Denby, and I'm more than happy to help.
Cool, thank you.